So this is Tree Talk, and today we're going to be talking about overuse in regards to athletic injuries and the issues with that in the clinical profession. So I'm Lindsay, I'm your host for Tree Talk, and these are our participants.
I'm Christine. I am a freshman here at Indiana State. I am in the Applied Medicine and Rehabilitation program, and I will come back to get my doctorate in physical therapy.
I am Gracie Horvath. I am also a freshman here at Indiana State and going for athletic training or physical therapy. Either one, I have not decided yet.
I'm Caitlin Davis. I'm a freshman here also. I'm in the Applied Medicine and Rehabilitation, and I am also going to come back and get my doctorate of physical therapy.
I'm Ryan Webb. I'm also a freshman here at Indiana State. I'm also in the Applied Medicine and Rehabilitation College, and I'm going to come back to get my DPT.
Okay, so the hottest topic that we're going to be talking about today is variation in the definition of overuse in regards to injuries. So what would you guys say overuse is to you?
Well, with me, I guess definitely an overuse injury isn't going to be an injury that's caused by a specific event. So in terms of the injury being overuse, I think overuse is more of a mechanism to describe how the injury was occurred and like how it led up to it. It's definitely going to be something that's not just within like a day or two. It's going to have to be more long term of like over weeks or a whole season, or it just depends on like what sport is going to be, how long it takes to have an overuse injury.
I agree. It's not something that's just going to happen immediately. It's something that takes time. It's kind of, yeah, that's it.
For me, it's going to take a long period of time, and I think it's once an injury has already been initiated, the overuse is you continue to use it, or maybe an injury hasn't necessarily been diagnosed yet, but you use it so much to where one starts to develop.
I agree. There's a difference between a fatigue injury and a overuse injury. Fatigue injury could be from an excessive workout, while overuse injury will be over weeks of time. They'll be injured after several weeks.
So college or in high school, high school years ago, not too long ago. So if you guys have any experience with injuries, especially regarding
For me, definitely I swam varsity all 4 years in high school, so my shoulders were definitely overused. We'd go 3-4 hour practices weeks on end, and so my shoulders were extremely fatigued, and I would continue to use them to maximal effort the following days or weeks up until leading to swim meets.
I also have experience overuse, actually currently dealing with stress fractures from overuse of running on concrete. I'm a track and field athlete here at Indiana State, and constant pressure on my shins and actually my knees. I'm a long jumper, and I jump off my left foot, and constant jump practices every single week, 2 days a week, meets every weekend. It puts a lot of stress on my shin bones and my knees, so I totally know what it's like.
I wrestled in high school for 4 years, and I did the same thing with shoulders. After 3-4 months of guys torquing on your shoulders, you tend to loosen some tendons up and develop some injuries.
I've also had some overuse injury experience, I guess you could say. I was in band starting from 7th grade all the way up until my junior year of high school, and I played mallet, so it was a lot of rotating on my wrists, and I got a lot of injuries dealing with the muscles of my thumb and my wrist just from the rotations of playing mallets. And I never really allowed those to heal, especially during season, because what I see, I don't know if any of you all feel the same way, I would go from marching band to winter drumline, so it would be a year-round thing, and I think a lot of that is what's happening to a lot of sports, especially in collegiate. You're gonna have practices leading up to during off season, and then you've got your practices during season plus your competition. So these extended participation hours are going to lead up to injuries as well. If you all have any comments on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead, Caitlin.
I totally agree. Because with me at least, I am not resting. Like shin splints and stress fractures take 6 weeks not doing anything. And right now I'm just modifying my practices and not really resting the full amount that I should be. And so it's not really helping my case at all. So you got to rest and get your time to heal, or it's just going to continue to be a length of time that you're dealing with it.
Yeah, for me, I was a year-round swimmer, so I swam in club when off season with high school swimming. And finally, after I was done, I let my shoulders rest for a while. But now I'm a power lifter, so I'm back into using weights on top of my shoulders. So, and within the amount of time that I was allowed to rest, my shoulders were able to heal and recover. And so I didn't realize how much I'd overused them until I was done. But looking back at it, we didn't take time to recover within like the club season, and then the high school season was maybe a week or two. So we're definitely looking back, I should have like rested more and definitely stretched as well, taking those precautions rather than just to overuse them and to continue to push them through each practice.
Yeah, I same with you, Gracie, kind of like a year-round sport considering I have indoor season, outdoor season, and we have workouts during the summer. And on top of running on that concrete inside and running on the pavement at home, it just is an ongoing process. And we have weightlifting and weights also. So it's just kind of like a year-round thing that you have to deal with, and if you don't get your rest.
Same here, but I did not give my shoulders a break. So I have some chronic injuries now due to the fact that I didn't rest them. So now I got to work on strengthening those muscles to help prevent pain. But being a three-sport athlete in high school, between hitting guys in football, being torqued on in wrestling, and then throwing a ball in baseball, my shoulders didn't get any break.
So you all think that rest would probably be the best preventative measure that you would utilize before you were injured, but there's kind of two parts. There's care and prevention. So what do you guys do to care for these injuries that you?
For care for me, being in the bone, it just kind of was a lot of pain. You can't really ice it, and it's not going to like help with inflammation because it's in my bone. And honestly, for your bone, like that's all you're going to be able to do is rest it to help with it not constantly hurting. But as for my knee, inflammation in my knee is ice. And sometimes just with like the pain that I have, ibuprofen, Tylenol, and sometimes ice actually did help. Like with the pain, it wasn't honestly like helping my bone get better, but it did kind of decrease the pain just having some ice.
And so with me, for caring for the injury, especially with mine, because it was in such like an active place, with like you use your hands every single day, and with going to classes, riding and stuff like that, there wasn't a lot I could do to care unless it was just resting and like taking time off of practice. I would ice. I'd utilize ice. I'd utilize wrapping it to try and like stabilize it more often. So like I wasn't, even though I had to use it, I had to move it. I wasn't moving it as much. But I really don't think there's really a lot you can do to care for it other than just taking that time off to heal. So I mean, like everything, it helps manage like the pain, manage you dealing with it. But for really caring for it, if you're really like wanting to care for the injury and make progressions to get back into the sport, there's really not anything else you can do other than just taking time off and resting your body and not working it more.
Definitely agree. For me, for swimming, we would take time like after I was done, use heat or ice packs and just like trying to rest them as much as possible. Definitely would go get a massage, loosen my shoulders up a little bit. But like looking back at it now, I definitely needed to prevent it more than caring. I would care for it once it already happened, but taking that precaution of not preventing those shoulder injuries were something that I didn't take into consideration that I would definitely regret not doing.
Yeah, I agree with Gracie. I never cared for it before I had my shoulder injury, but after I had my injury, I had solely shoulder brace that was to help keep the shoulder like in place and protect it from any excessive torque. I also iced it after meets practices, stuff like that. But even with that, it still wasn't enough to prevent any more injury because it was already injured to a certain extent where it didn't matter unless I went and got surgery.
Sometimes I also think, and you guys can elaborate on this too, that you don't really think that something like that's gonna happen to you, even though like you know that that could potentially like be you, but you don't really think about it. Honestly, like I'm not gonna take the time to prevent all of these injuries that could potentially happen in certain sports and events. Like you just don't. You're like, oh yeah, well this could probably happen, so I'm gonna try and prevent it. You just don't think about it. You're in the moment, and then something happens, and you're like, oh well, crap, and then you just have to kind of care for it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I know you can probably elaborate more on this since you are a collegiate athlete right now, being in track and stuff. With looking back on practices from high school standpoint to coming to collegiate and like intensifying workouts and stuff, do you think that like the prevention standpoint from like, I don't really know how to word this, but trying to prevent it from happening more in high school versus college, do you see a difference now versus like, you know, how the workouts are intensifying in college? Do you see like athletic trainers trying to prevent it more with treatments and stuff?
I mean, athletic trainers, they try to do prevention programs for certain big injuries that happen more commonly, I think. And so they are obviously, they're there for you to come to them if you are hurting. And like they don't go around asking us every day, each and every person, like, hey, are you okay today? Like, are you having any injuries? Like they wait for you to come to them. And for the point of coming from high school to college, you could be in a total of 4 events in track and field, and I was in 4 events in high school. So I didn't just do long jumps. But when I came here, I'm just specifically here for long jump. So I'm jumping more, and I'm on I'm pushing off. It's a lot of force whenever you're jumping, obviously, off of one leg after sprinting down a runway. And so it's a lot more force, especially whenever you have multiple jump days. Like in high school, I would jump maybe once every 2 weeks. So it's definitely a change from intensifying workouts. And we would weightlift and have practice for like an hour and 15 minutes in high school. But now adding weights and practice, it's 3 hours a day. And then you go to competitions, and you're sitting on a bus. We just went to Auburn. That's 11.5 hours on the bus. So you're sitting there, and your body is just drained. So whenever you get off of the bus, you already feel like crap. And I was actually talking to my coach, like jumping and stuff. I felt so much heavier just sitting on that bus and not having any physical activity, and then going and putting your body through that force. It can be really painful.
People can relate to this if you want to. But I think for me, a lot of it has to do with habits. So like Caitlin earlier you said about like you don't think it's going to happen to you with the injuries and stuff. So like even one day, I mean, it could make the whole difference of whether getting injured or not. So like for me, I never got in the habit of stretching or like preventing those injuries. So I mean, in the long run, I mean, if I had gotten in the habit, it would have made a lot better recovery.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Lindsay, I know like you're asking the questions, but do you have any input on this, like with the prevention or like the care?
I agree with Gracie in that like you just have to build a habit of like stretching and things like that. I know in junior high, like maybe that's something so young and you can not get away with it. Like I had it when I got to like my junior and senior year in high schoal. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm so old. I actually have to stretch.
For real, you're old.
But I agree. You need to develop those habits early on. As far as the articles go, another topic is the age that people are getting injured. Like you would that the older adults that are getting injured due to age and how aging works. And but according to the article where they did the research at the high school athletes, it's people between the ages of 13 and 17 that get the most injuries, even more than just like people below 12
Just in personal opinion, I don't know if any of you all agree. I think that in high school nowadays that sports are pushed a lot. And especially in my high school, it was like if you weren't on a sports team, you needed to be doing something else.
You're a loser.
And then if you weren't on a sports team, you were kind of like for lack of a better term, like the little loser that wasn't involved in much or whatever. So I feel like, at least for me, like it was always a debate on whether or not marching band was a sport or whatever. But I went from marching band to doing track my junior and senior year, and so like I got into that sports mindset. And then once I started like an actual like school sanctioned, it's a sport. Definitely, I think that a lot of kids are being pushed into sports, and then also just parents wanting them to be active. But just that increase in sports in those high school years to be a part of the team and be that push for there is definitely adding a lot to increase in injuries.
For sure. We live in a really competitive society now to where like you basically have to pick one sport and dominate at that one sport. So year round, you better be in that club or that school sport. So yeah, I mean, in 12 and I was basically the prime age to really develop those skills. So it didn't surprise me to know that that's the prime age to get injured, because you're pushing your body to its limits all the time so you can become that athlete with those skills.
I think that also parents that were athletes in high school or in college, they have kids and then they want them to be athletic, and so they also push them extra hard because they want them to be the best, and maybe their parents were the best in high school, so they need to be the best now. And so not only do you have like people in your like peer group pushing you and like saying, hey, you know, you're not cool unless you're in a sport, you have your parents at home who are pushing you, and it's really stressful. And on top of that, you have your coaches. And honestly, I think that back to like kind of preventing stuff, coaches need to be more like educated on the kinds of things that can happen in sports, because they also sometimes don't care. Like you can fall and hurt yourself, and they'll be like, "Oh, you're fine. Just go take a break. Go drink some water." Yeah, drinking some water is really gonna help my ankle sprain that I have right now. Like they don't understand, and I'm not saying that like that's their fault. Maybe they just need to be educated on it. And I think it would be good for them to have kind of like an education on that. Like injuries are serious, and they don't just need a water break. Like they can actually be hurt, and for overuse, their muscles are probably run down from you practicing and pushing them so hard.
My points don't relate to yours, but I want to add in that when you're at this age, 13 to 17, you're still growing a lot because of you're hitting that adolescent stage, and you're still maturing and stuff. So you're more susceptible to injuries, for one, and then two, you have that God complex where you think you're invincible, because when you're young and dumb like that, you think you are, and you think nothing can really happen to you. So they try to do more advanced things that they see the professionals do, and then they end up hurting themselves or someone else.
I just want to piggyback a little bit off of what Gracie said, and how, especially in nowadays society, we are a lot more competitive, and that we do see students picking one sport to dominate in, and that way also that can lead to scholarships for like colleges and stuff. And I think that definitely leads to an increase in the overuse, especially recently, because if you're doing one sport year round, you're going to be doing the same thing year round. So if it's track, you're running year round, you're running on whether or not you're inside, it's concrete, you're outside, you could be running on pavement, or you could have a track. But definitely focusing on that one sport is definitely going to lead to that up in the overuse injuries.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Confidence and those kinds of things. And I feel like the competitive nature is kind of taken away from that. Like it's still good to be competitive, but let's face it, high school sports are taken a little too seriously at times.
For sure. Kids aren't allowed to be kids anymore. It's you pick one sport and you're dominating at it, and it's not fun and games, it's competitive from the start. But yeah.
I think that at least in my high school, my coaches were they were pretty good about understanding that, or talking to us about that sports have a different side than just being competitive. Like, yeah, you want to win your games, but like you said, Lindsay, like teaching you leadership and teaching you teamwork, like that is also a big thing that I took out of I played 3 sports in high school, that I took out of every single one of them. And it could have been very helpful that I had great coaches and great teammates. But I think that's also really important, and I hope that it is still like in high schools and that it doesn't completely go away.
Well, I think we're getting a little off topic, but it's all good. Whenever we look at one of the articles, it says that for overuse injuries, with girls, 13.2% of all injuries were from overuse injuries, whereas for boys, only 5.5%. Why do you guys think that maybe females are more prone to the overuse injuries than
Well, as a female, I know that I don't know. I feel like I have to like have more to prove as an athlete, because I definitely with guys, I don't know if it's the same, but like in high school, like I was one of like 3 female throwers in track, and then there were like maybe like 7 guys, and so like the guys got all the attention. So like I was always trying to like overexert myself to try and get my coach's attention, which definitely led to more forcefulness on my muscles and everything when trying to throw and whatnot.
I think girls they have a tendency to go to the sports that are more likely to overuse themselves, and guys are more likely to go to the ones that use direct contact. So most of their injuries are going to be within the direct contact of it, or within the moment kind of injury. And girls are they're spanned over time, like swimming or track or running, like just kind of those type of injuries, rather than like football or wrestling or basketball, where it's like instant in the moment. Break, fracture. So
Right, I completely agree. Like literally, that you that whenever you are in those kinds of sports, that it does take longer. Terms using the term overuse of how we explained it earlier at the beginning of the video, that it's going to take a long time, and boys are more likely to go to the contact sports like soccer and football. And I completely agree. Like track and swimming and stuff like that, it's going to take longer time for your muscles to get overused.
To add on to that, sports like football, they tend to spread out certain skill sets throughout the week when they practice. So that kind of helps out with spreading out your use. So like cross-country runners, they'll go and run or lift, period. Where football players, they'll work on a certain skill one day and then work on a certain skill another day, and it gives that one part of your body a break while your other is getting worked on.
I'm not sure how we're doing on here, but we can go ahead and so,
I mean, we kind of talked about it throughout the whole video too. Like, I don't know if I'm just biased because I'm track and field athlete, but track probably is one of the bigger ones, just because we are, not just me personally, but the distance. I'll talk about them for a second. The distance runners, they'll go and run a 5K on meet day. That next day, they'll go out and run 14 miles. Like, that's insane, and that's crazy overusing your body, because your muscles and stuff, because that night before, like, you're running meet pace, like race pace. Like, it's not just your easy jog out. And they're in college, so their run is not a jog in the first place. And so they're out running that 5K, and then they go out and they're running 14 miles that next day. Like, it's crazy. Like, putting your body through that stress every week, like, it's just crazy.
Yeah, I definitely agree that track and field is especially up there, because you have a certain number of activities that you're doing, and you're practicing those activities at least like on a regular basis, and so you're doing the same thing for that. I think another one that's definitely up there would be swimming, because you're using the same motion most of the time. Or I don't know, Gracie, you can elaborate on this because you are a swimmer, but I feel like you're going to have a lot more in overuse injury with something that you're doing the same thing over and over again, like track and field or like swimming, rather than like a contact sport with football, or even then, I know, Brian, you can attest for wrestling, but I feel like wrestling still, it's going to change up because you never know what move's going to come up next.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, swimming, you have the 4 strokes and then drills within that, but it's pretty repetitive, and usually you have a specialty stroke, so you practice that for the most part. But like our distance swimmers, I mean, they'll swim 500s, thousands miles for time, and then the next day or next weekend they have another meet. But also, like, besides for cardio sports, powerlifting, I'm a powerlifter, so I would definitely say that there's stress fractures that are or overuse of muscles is definitely a concern. Like deadlifting, I think there was a good 2 weeks that my lower back hurt so bad where I could not deadlift for 2 weeks because I had overused it, so I had to take time to rest and recover. So I would think my point is overusing can be used not only in cardio but in weightlifting sports as well.
2 other sports you can put into this mix is baseball and tennis. You see a lot of elbow injuries with tennis elbow or Tommy Johns, which is just a repetitive, recurring injury on the certain tendons in the elbow, just from constant torque on them. So those 2, it's a repetitive motion that they do every day for every practice, every meet, every game. It's a recurring injury.
All right.
To kind of summarize, one of the biggest issues with the term overuse is there's not a really clear definition that is universal that everyone uses. Sometimes people just use it kind of haphazardly to where no one really has a definition for it or can define what it actually means. And also, high school athletes and collegiate athletes are the most prone to these overuse injuries, and girls tend to have more than females. It's just important to realize this so that we don't just keep pushing our athletes beyond their limits. Even it's just not necessary, especially if you can put it in your team. So with that, I think we will
This was Street Talk. Now we'll leave you alone.